Hi everyone, how was lunch? Good? So this is Carbon Zero, the debate between still versus sparkling water. Just kidding, but I am team still water. This joke was more for me, just to kind of break the ice a little bit. But I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I'm Australian Filipino, and growing up, we had this tradition that whenever you saw someone who was an older adult in your life, so someone who was a godparent, auntie, uncle, etc., you'd take their hand and put it towards your forehead. So this is called manukpo, which translates to your hand, please. And it's a tradition which dates back to pre-colonial times, and it's a gesture of respect. It signifies your openness to accept the wisdom and guidance of the elders before you. You would do it every time you see them, regardless of how many times you've done it before. So it's with this sentiment that I pay my respects to the Indigenous elders and traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people. So, manukpo. Kumusta? Hi, hello. My name is Christian Llagas, and I'm a UX designer, researcher, and content strategist. I've been a design consultant for about 10 years now, and I've been fortunate enough to work on a variety of different projects across many industries. I've worked on projects for Nintendo, Southeast Water, and CPA, which is Certified Practicing Accountants. So if you've ever studied to become an accountant, lived in Melbourne and paid a water bill, or bought a Nintendo Switch game online, you might have used something that I've worked on. And if you've done all three, let me know, because I would like to buy you a beer. So this is obviously created using generative AI, much like many of the other images you've seen today. But did you know that early studies have shown that an image like this can use the same amount of energy as charging your phone? So I'll talk about the relevance of this towards the end of my talk. Right. So the only way out is through. Face challenges directly rather than avoiding them. Not only is this relevant to the massive, massive problem that is climate change, it describes my experience working with New South Wales Government to design and build a web-based tool that helps agencies get to carbon zero. I worked with an amazing team of environmental specialists, designers, and engineers, and we went from having no prior knowledge in this area to having the expertise in the practical implementation of the carbon zero process. We created working software in less than 6 months while remaining on time and under budget. And this is no small feat for any project, let alone one in government. Now, before I dive into this project, I've got to be honest with you, I feel a little bit weird standing here talking to you about carbon emissions and carbon accounting. I don't think I'd consider myself someone who is an environmentalist or someone engaged in climate activism. I mean, I understand why we need to reduce our carbon footprint, but beyond changing my own personal behaviours, I didn't know what else I could do. I try to reduce the amount of meat that I eat, and I fail because Filipino food is delicious. I sort and separate my waste, and the guilt that I feel when I forget my keep cup doesn't actually stop me from getting that takeaway coffee. I'm not a scientist, nor do I have a science background. In fact, I almost failed high school science. And at the end of the day, I'm just a designer with an arts degree, yet I'm really proud of the work that we did on this project. It was my skills as a designer and a facilitator that helped us get to such a good outcome. And I really hope that by sharing the story of this project, you'll see that getting to carbon zero isn't just a problem to be solved by scientists. It's an area that is massive and complex, and designers are uniquely positioned to meet these challenges head on. Maybe you're someone who wants to do more, but you don't know what to do. I hope this talk can serve as a catalyst for something greater. All right. Let's start with a bit of background. So late last year, the New South Wales Government passed the Climate Change Net Zero Future Act. This legislation enshrines the goal of net zero emissions by 2050 into law, and sets interim targets of 50% reduction by 2030 and 70% by 2035. So this means that all New South Wales agencies and related organisations must report on their carbon emissions and demonstrate their progress towards meeting these goals. So to allow them to do this, the project team was asked to design a tool which helps government agencies track, plan, and reduce their carbon emissions. There was an existing process here for when environmental consultants are involved, but it was unclear on how things would work for those with no knowledge or expertise in this area. Not all agencies have the skills or the means to hire their own experts, so for this process to scale, it needed to be simpler to understand and be open to more people. You see, an organisation reaches carbon zero when the amount of greenhouse gas they produce is no more than the amount they remove from the atmosphere. A company may produce 100 tonnes of carbon per year as part of their regular activities. So as an example number, this is the number that needs to go down. And investing in carbon offset projects that reduce, remove, or capture emissions can help equalise whatever emissions remain. Now, offsets weren't a part of this phase of the project. Our focus was more at looking at genuine ways that we could reduce without resorting to purchasing offsets. And when we first started, a proof of concept was created, but it was really more suited towards experts, so we had to start from scratch. So what do we do to go from a starting point where we had nothing, or not very much, to building something that was useful? First, we had to learn the basics. We distilled down the complexity into simpler concepts. We then reframed the carbon zero process in a way that was more realistic and achievable. And with this knowledge, it allowed us to start designing with a lot more creativity. Pressing the button. There we go. And before we could even think about the design of the tool, we really needed to learn the basics. So how carbon emissions are calculated, what a carbon accounting tool is, and what is a net zero pathway. And just out of curiosity, can you put your hand up if you know how carbon emissions are calculated? Excellent, excellent. We have 4 hands. So come with me as I explain how we do that. So you first start with your emission source. So this is something that you do or consume that produces carbon. So let's take electricity, for example. Take the amount of electricity that you consume and multiply it by an emissions factor. Now, an emissions factor is a number that's used to quantify how much greenhouse gas a particular source emits. So in this example, 1,500 kilowatts of electricity multiplied by a factor of 0.85 equals 1.28 tonnes of CO2e, or carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, if you think about what a financial accounting system is, so that is something that tracks how much money is coming in and how much is spent, a carbon accounting system tries to do something similar. It tracks your activities and how much carbon is emitted as a result. And it often makes visible some of the things that you either take for granted or don't really think about so much. So let's say you're an organisation that has a couple of buildings located around the state. You've got an office, you've got a couple of depots and a facility. So you first start by taking an inventory of all your carbon producing activities. So these can include things like the natural gas your buildings use, the petrol your cars consume, the waste you produce, and the flights you take. Now, not everything needs to be collected or can be collected. There's ways to figure out what's relevant to you. You now have to do this same thing across all your buildings. So this starts to give you the total amount of emissions that you produce in a year. So in 2020, 2021, for example, let's say you produced 100 tons of CO2e over the whole year. Now, the goal here is to take all those different emissions and convert them into a single unit. So that's tons of CO2e. You now have a standardized way of measuring how much carbon your organization generates. So your baseline year, for example, 2020, 2021, is the year you compare your progress against. All right, so you guys still with me? If not, there's going to be a quiz after this. All right, so let's move on to the last concept, a net zero pathway. So a net zero pathway is a communication tool. It's essentially a list of all the activities an organization intends to do in order to reach their goals. It's essentially a plan for how they're going to get there. So some examples of reduction projects include implementing new technologies, so installing solar or heat pumps, to changing behaviours, reducing consumption, generally being more efficient with what you have. So you start to map these projects against your baseline, alongside an estimate of how much you think these will reduce your emissions by. Now, in this very dumbed-down example, I'm going to install solar and a new air conditioning system, and I expect that this will reduce my emissions by 2028, by 60%, to 60% by 2028. So a pathway is essentially an action plan for people to rally around and strive towards. Now, depending on your purpose, or on its purpose, a pathway can be as simple as the one we've got pictured, or it can be very detailed with projections, cost estimates, and timelines. All right, once we learned the fundamentals, we now needed to design the new carbon zero process. So to achieve this, we needed to get to know the people that we were designing for. And we had to understand the sorts of challenges that they would face in meeting these obligations. There was a bit of anxiety around getting it right. They either didn't know what to do or didn't have the resources to do it, or there wasn't a standardized process. And so getting to net zero is often thought of as a linear process. You collect your data and establish your baseline, you create an action plan, and then you implement and track progress. So we had assumed that each step needed to be completed before you move on to the next. But what we learned was that the first step can often be the hardest. Agencies are expected to have a complete understanding of their carbon footprint before you can start to make plans, which sets a really unrealistic expectation, as many agencies don't have the ability or the means to collect the data, all the data that's needed. So what to do? To get this data, investment is needed. And to unlock funding, progress towards net zero needs to be demonstrated. We needed to talk about this differently and meet people where they're at. Start by starting. And it was important for the tool to focus on what could be collected rather than trying to capture everything. And it really allowed the pressure to be taken off agencies. Start small, make enough incremental progress to build the confidence to keep going. So for many organizations, the journey to net zero is going to look something more like this. You start by capturing everything that's feasible. This allows you to start making plans using imperfect information. And this should be enough to build a business case and justify the investment that you need to start. From here, you'll be able to measure the impact of your activities. This gives you evidence to spend more money, to collect better data, and it gives you a more complete baseline. So you rinse and repeat this until you get to net zero, reviewing your plans as things change. And if COVID has taught us anything, things are going to change. All right, so we've learned the basics, we better understand the process, and we now had to quickly turn this thinking into working UI. So it was important for me that we build out a strong vision for the tool. We didn't have detailed requirements, so establishing this direction really helped ensure we were making the right trade-offs and focusing on the right things. So Fair warning, the UI you're going to see are just mock-ups of the design to give you a flavor of what the tool looks like. I can't show you actual UI, but trust me when I say it looks much nicer. And UI people, please don't come for me. I did this in PowerPoint. So our approach was to allow the user to play with their data in a low-consequence way. We needed people to see what was possible and see how useful it can be to them and not be intimidated by it. We wanted users to be able to quickly see their emissions based on real data that we have available and use that to get ballpark numbers. And instead of complex workflows, we guided users towards the things that would have the most potential impact. Our goal here was for people to look at this data, understand it, tell others about it, and continue to improve it by adding more data to it. So there's more here that I'd love to be able to show, but the tool is still being worked on. Now, looking back, what made our project so successful was the way that we were able to come together, each from our different disciplines, and work towards a common goal. It was a massive team effort, and it was only possible because everyone was able to play their part. And specifically for us designers, we contributed by helping our team get up to speed with the important concepts, reframing the net zero process to be more approachable and realistic, and then finally, by making things real through the use of rapid prototyping, we really helped minimize decision fatigue and decision paralysis. We had to be comfortable taking an agile approach, making decisions that were good enough and then moving on. Right. So this space needs the skills and the creativity of people like you and designers like you and everyone else, not only to help build better tools, but the things that sit around the carbon zero process. You may be excellent at data design. You may be a gun at mapping out and visualizing workflows. You may even be great at pitching ideas and building out awareness and support. These are all the sorts of things that are needed to meet the challenge of getting to net zero. Now, earlier today, Louise talked about the sorts of things you can do to save the world without quitting your desk job. I thought I might add a little bit more, and to help me with this, I asked my client on this project, Catherine Carrier, to help me with some advice. So, think about how you can better amplify the message of the sustainability work that's being done. Think about the efficiency of the design work that you do, and think about the ongoing impacts of the design decisions you make. And finally, think about the impact of AI and other emerging technologies. So remember my image of Mario from earlier? How can we better measure the resources used to create an image like that? Thank you very much.